Ark of the Covenant was the main representation of God's presence among his people in the Old Testament. But over time, the Alliance Ark has always aroused people's curiosity. Whether because of its relevant role in the Bible, or because it is involved in extraordinary events, or the mysteries surrounding it, or the exclusivity it had, since if someone unauthorized touched it, ends up dying, the figure of the Ark of the Covenant became very popular. But many people do not know their true biblical meaning and end up adopting interpretations of it that has nothing to do with the Bible. But in this video, you will understand what the Ark of the Covenant really was and what its correct meaning according to the Bible was. You will also find out if the Alliance Ark has any importance to us today. The Ark of the Covenant was a rectangular chest made of gold, coated acacia wood inside and outside. The Ark of the Alliance media about 1 meter and 10 long by 70 centimeters wide in height. In each of its lower ends there was a gold ring, and in these rings were inserted rods that served as instruments for transporting the Ark over the shoulder of the Kohathite Levites, the family from which the priestly lineage was separated for the service of the Lord. The Ark lid was called a propitiatory. This lid was made of pure gold, and there were the figures of 2 cherubim, also of beaten gold. These cherubim had been placed facing each other with their extended wings, and it was on this lid that the priests sprinkled the blood of animals to provide the wrath of God over the people. And hence comes the propitiatory designation. In the Bible, the Ark of the Covenant is also designated by other names. It is called the Ark of the Concert, or more literally Ark of Testimony, the Ark of the Lord, and the Ark of God. These designations refer especially to the fact that the Ark of the Covenant kept the main symbols of the covenant between God and the people of Israel in Sinai. And we know that the Ark of the Covenant was built by Bezalel, according to God's model to Moses. The full description of the Covenant Ark can be found in chapter 25 of the Exodus book. But what was the meaning and main function of the Ark of the Covenant? Well, in the Old Testament, the Ark is cited about 200 times with at least 22 different designations. Given this, the Ark of the Covenant seems to have served several functions throughout, but no doubt, among all these functions, 2 stand out as the main and fundamental for all others. First, the Ark of the Covenant was the symbol of God's presence among its people. Secondly, the Alliance Ark served as a storage place for the 2 boards of the law, which were the commandments prescribed in the Sinai Alliance. Hence comes the name Ark of the Testimony. And the Ark of the Covenant also kept the vase of manna and the Aaron stick. So, starting from these 2 basic concepts, throughout biblical history, we can see the Ark of the Covenant being considered as representing the throne of God, serving as a guide to the people of Israel in the desert, as a type of Palladio de Guerra, having a low emphasis on the history of Jericho's conquest, and besides playing a very important role in crossing Jordan. Therefore, the Ark that was built in Sinai accompanied the Israelites throughout the pilgrimage to the Promised Land. But in the time of the Judges, the Ark was taken to Shiloh, having already passed by Gilgal and Bethel. She remained in Shiloh until she was captured by the Philistines. In the first book of Samuel, at that time a terrible grief slaughtered the Israelites, because with the capture of the Ark, the glory had been taken from Israel. Because of sin and disobedience, the people of Israel were guilty of defeat to the Philistines and of the consequent capture of the Ark of the Covenant. As part of his judgment on Israel, God allowed the Philistines to take the Ark, but it also caused major problems to the Philistines. They were afflicted with terrible calamities and had their main deity, God Dagon, humiliated before the Lord's Ark, in a clear manifestation of God's power to foreign peoples. Then, after 7 months of pests, the Philistines took the Ark from the covenant to Kiriath-Jearim, where she remained for over 20 years. When David climbed the throne, he established that Jerusalem would be the political and religious capital of the nation of Israel, carrying the Ark of the Covenant there. But rather, the Bible records recklessness before the Lord's Ark. It turned out that the Israelites tried to transport the Ark in an unauthorized way by God in the episode involving the death of Uzzah, a man from the family of Abinadab, where the Covenant Ark had previously been. The biblical text says that Uzzah held the hastily Ark and was wounded by God. And this episode was very significant and caused great fear in King David himself, causing the Ark to be 3 months old at Obed-Edom's house. When finally the Ark was taken to Jerusalem, it was installed in a tent. Later, when King Solomon built the temple, the Ark was sheltered in it. And the Bible reports that the covenant ark was replaced in the sanctuary during King Josiah's reforms. Then the prophet Jeremiah also prophesied over a time when the Ark of the Covenant would no longer be used. Jerusalem should be called the throne of God. And beyond these references, the Old Testament's historical and prophetic books rarely refer to the Ark, but it is likely that it continued to be used in the great religious festivals of Jerusalem. Even some psalms speak of ceremonies in which the Alliance Ark may have been used. In these ceremonies, possibly the ark was loaded in front of the people by the priests. But perhaps the main curiosity of people about the Ark of the Covenant today has to do with its whereabouts. No doubt there is a lot of speculation about where the Ark of the Covenant would have stopped. But that, despite many theories, the great truth is that the final whereabouts of the Ark is a mystery. Many scholars advocate a plausible hypothesis that the Alliance Ark was lost during the destruction of Jerusalem by the Nebuchadnezzar army in about 587 BC. Then the ark may have been captured and taken to Babylon as a type of spoil of war. Thus, it may have been maintained as a trophy or even been destroyed by the Babylonians to extract their gold. If the Babylonians kept the preserved covenant ark, this condition may have changed when Babylon itself fell to the Fear Thread coalition. In any case, it is important to understand that the disappearance of the ark in that context was part of God's purpose in the spill of his judgment on Judah. Nebuchadnezzar, Emperor Babylon, who invaded Jerusalem. Moreover, this suggestion of the loss of the ark in the period of exile mainly explores that prophecy of Jeremiah, when the prophet spoke about the absence of the covenant ark. On the other hand, there are also references in the apocryphal books that claim that Jeremiah would have hidden the ark of the covenant. Supposedly, he would have placed the ark in a cave on Mount Nebo, along with the tent and the altar of incense, before the destruction of Jerusalem. However, scholars emphasize the great improbability of this having occurred. Finally, a very popular interpretation among some Christians is one that says the Ark of the Covenant would be currently in heaven, due to its reference in the book of Revelation. The problem is that this interpretation is based on reading the book of Revelation that completely ignores its characteristics as prophetic literature, its purpose, and the symbolic style of its language. Moreover, this interpretation ends up diverting the purpose for which the ark was built. Therefore, this interpretation finds neither biblical support nor support between the scholars of the Ancient and the New Testament. But the best definition of what happened to the Alliance Ark depends on our understanding of the important and specific role it played at the beginning of Israel's history. The Ark served especially as a visible symbol of God's presence dwelling with his people. Then, fulfilled this purpose, God himself allowed it to be taken and destroyed, preventing it from becoming the greatest target of idolatry ever seen. Moreover, we can never forget that both the covenant ark and the other elements of worship in the Old Testament were temporary, and simply pointed to a superior reality, and really definitive, that was inaugurated in the person and work of Christ. This means that if the Ark of the Covenant was the symbol of God's presence dwelling with his people, Christ is the final revelation of God dwelling in his people through the ministry of the Holy Spirit, which applies to us the work of redemption and us qualifies to be the temple itself, where God dwells. That is why, even though the Ark of the Covenant was found at the present stage of divine revelation in the New Covenant, it would have no purpose for God's people.
Getting to the end of a video like this is truly rare. In a rushed world, you paused, listened, and reflected, and that puts you among the few who are truly present. If this meant something to you, tell us your city in the comments, subscribe if you'd like, and share it with someone who's also looking for more than just distraction. Thanks, a big hug, and see you soon.